Story 1. Crowning during childbirth. The pause between contractions while the head positioned itself was almost overwhelming. Story 2. A Texan teenager kicked me in the groin while shouting, "That's my purse. I don't know you." The pain was quite severe. Story 3. Honestly, heartbreak is a physical pain akin to a broken bone. Bruised ribs, torn tendons and ligaments, strains, sprains, dislocated fingers and toes. Yet, nothing is as uncomfortable and enduring as true heartbreak. Story 4. So far, the worst pain I have ever experienced was from dealing with kidney stones a couple of times. They can be quite unbearable. Story 5. Being cheated on. It's one thing to see someone close to you suffer, but it's totally different when you experience it yourself. It's not just about cheating. It's the fact that you trusted that person for several years, and what they did makes you question everything that happened from the day you met them. One piece of advice for everyone. The solution to a bad relationship or marriage is to break up, not to cheat. Story 6. Losing a friend is not about losing them to death, but losing them because they decided to let go. That feeling is akin to homesickness. They seem very similar to me. Story 7. Renal colic caused by kidney stones occurs more than 35 times. I have broken over 40 bones, sometimes multiple at once, and likely received nearly 100 sutures due to accidents. None of these injuries compare to the pain experienced with renal colic. Uveitis is a close second in terms of pain. Story 8. After childbirth, I underwent a vaginal tear repair with 2 layers of stitches and no pain relief. I had to disassociate to endure the experience. Story 9. Emotional. Grieving the loss of a father and feeling blindsided by divorce. Physical pain. Suffering an ankle fracture from a slide tackle in soccer. I was hit and momentarily lost consciousness. Story 10. Loneliness and isolation that have persisted for years, along with people presenting to cure the problem, create a situation where mind games are played. Essentially, you become cold and numb. Visual chaos becomes soothing and fierce. Abrupt defense becomes a remedy. You become dismissive of any real, long-term joyful or pleasurable existence. The aftermath of catastrophic destruction, deliberately set forth by psychological manipulation, combined with being exceptionally sensitive to everything from the start, results in a painful existence. Story 11. Kidney stones. The presence of them before passing feels like a dagger twisting in my side. Story 12. I decided to have my wisdom teeth removed. Since I was living alone and didn't want to ask for help, I chose to have local anesthesia. This turned out to be a very poor decision. The dentist covered my face completely, leaving me in the dark, and I could feel each tooth being pulled from my jaw. It was strange. There was no pain, but I felt pressure and heat, as well as what felt like my gums being torn. To make matters worse, the dentist broke 2 of my molars, so only half of one came out. I had to schedule surgery regardless, but the soonest available date was in 2 weeks. Story 13. Depends on what you mean. Physical pain from injury. I broke a bone in my hand. Physical pain from processes. As a teenager, my periods were so painful that I passed out. This is not normal, but it only happened when I was a teenager. Emotional pain. The first 19 years of my life were marked by abuse from my parents. Story 14. Waking up multiple times after an organ transplant without pain medication. I woke long enough to realize there were no pain medications available and then passed out. Story 15. Before I had a mastectomy, I had to get dye injected into my nipples. I have given birth and this pain was unreal. There was no numbing, nothing. Story 16. I once heard a friend's mother say that passing a large kidney stone was worse than all 12 children she labored to have combined. Not for me, obviously, but it's worth noting. Story 17. Gallbladder attack. I genuinely thought and hoped I was going to die. After 9 hours of feeling like I was stabbed in the stomach and throwing up bile. Story 18. The worst pain my 28-year-old wife has ever felt, combined with her nerve condition, is overwhelming. She is very thin and blind. She always tells me that my love was very happy, and even though she still has the strength to continue, That pain is the strongest I have felt. It ended her quality of life and destroyed me. Story 19. I was cleaning putty out of a window. I swung a hammer at a chisel and missed, hitting my thumb instead. I also struck my other thumb against the frame, cut that thumb, and accidentally hit myself with the hammer. All of that happened in one swing. I turned pale and nearly felt nauseous. I would compare that pain to having kidney stones. Story 20. I must say I was quite lucky. I never had a very painful experience. Perhaps the times I sprained my ankle were uncomfortable, but they weren't terrible. The most unbearable pain for me is a sore throat. Even if it's not severe, it's the most annoying sensation I have ever felt. Every time I have a sore throat, I lose my will to live. My throat is very sensitive, and a sore throat is truly horrible. Story 21. I sustained a complex femur fracture, 2 shattered kneecaps, a fractured tibia, 6 pelvic fractures, and a dislocated shoulder due to a motorcycle accident. I did not lose consciousness until they sedated me to reset everything, which was a sweet relief. Story 22. I broke my face in 3 places along with my jaw, dislocating it at the same time, which was quite severe. In 2022, I also broke my collarbone in 6 places, and that was extremely painful. Both of these accidents occurred while I was skiing, so it's clear that I'm not very good at it. Story 23. 2nd and 3rd degree burns on the chest with 1st degree burns on half of the face and head. 200 milligrams of Demerol did not help. Story 24. In August 2020, I was hit by a car while riding my bicycle to work in a hit-and-run accident. My right kneecap shattered on impact with the pavement. I lost consciousness from the pain and did not wake up until I was in the ambulance on the way to the hospital after a Good Samaritan took me from urgent care. Story 25. It might be after a cesarean section, including sterilization and uterine contractions, because I had previously broken my arms and legs in a car accident. It was not as painful as when I had a cesarean section and experienced uterine contractions. Story 26. I was 7 years old learning to ride a bike. Going downhill, I panicked and pressed the front brakes, which caused me to fly forward and land on my right elbow on the concrete. It was the worst pain ever. It felt so bad I thought I was going to die. I had already injured both knees and landed on my head from a ramp of stairs when I was 6. Story 27. But if it is emotional pain, it occurs when someone you believe is your close friend or confidant betrays you without mercy. Story 28. Spinal headache following a cesarean section was the most painful experience I have ever had. Resting flat in bed is recommended. However, that was impossible with a newborn infant. Getting up to meet her needs was painfully difficult. Although I knew it would be unbearable, I still got up every time she cried. It was torture, but so worth it. Story 29. Removal of part of the toenail involves using tweezers to dig and pull under the nail for about 10 minutes. Story 30. Once, I was wrestling with my male friend on a trampoline when he tripped me. I rolled over onto my hand, causing my pinky and ring fingers to bend all the way back. When I sat up, my friend asked what was wrong, but I couldn't speak because it hurt so badly. He looked at my fingers and, despite being very arrogant, he said they probably weren't broken since he had broken a few bones in his lifetime. Even weeks after the accident, I still couldn't bend my fingers. It took about 3 weeks before I could finally bend them again. Does anyone know what might have happened? If I did break my fingers, I would really like to know. Story 31. Honestly, it is very hard to rate them, but my top 3 in no particular order are my pericardium tearing and filling with liquid, a ruptured bloody ovarian cyst with endometriosis, and a nurse who tried to take my blood gas but could not find the artery in my wrist, so she started moving the needle around inside my wrist. Story 32. Being stabbed in the lower stomach and injuring my bladder or almost drowning. Hearing my wife lose a significant amount of blood during labor, and literally hearing the blood pooling out while she asked, "Am I dying?" Story 33. Ruptured tendons in both feet have resulted in severe flat feet due to Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which causes extreme pain in various ways. My feet have collapsed. I have had surgery twice on my right foot. The left foot will be corrected, but the right foot needs to heal completely before another surgery. I heal slowly due to Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and developed nerve damage after the last surgery. Walking is extremely painful. Story 34. Watching all my childhood pets, a dog and 2 cats, die as I got older was difficult. Regarding physical pain, when I was 11 to 13 years old, I had seizures every single day for those 2 years. It was extremely painful and one of the worst points of my life. The last seizure I experienced at 13 knocked me out from the pain, and I believe my brain may have some kind of permanent damage that might manifest later in life. Story 35. In 2021, I almost severed my toe when a child was being irresponsible while I was surfing. He tried to run me over, and his fin cut deep into my ring toe on my left foot. I went to the emergency room, they patched me up, and advised no activities for a few months. However, I wanted to go surfing again a few weeks after the stitches were out. On a 10-foot wave, I wiped out, and my foot slammed against a rock reef. Felt like someone was slowly peeling my skin back. It turns out I partially developed it, and the seam split back to almost a half-inch depth. I couldn't walk for the next month and a half, with no strenuous activity for about 20 weeks. Unfortunately, I didn't think bodyboarding was strenuous. I wiped out again, then broke the toe, causing a compound fracture. Let's just say I have a massive fear of surfboard fins now. Story 36. Other than delivering my 2 sons, who were 8 pounds 14 ounces and 9 pounds 10 ounces respectively, and having heads in the 95th percentile, the second worst experience was pleurisy. I could have sworn an arrow was shot through me, causing horrible pain in 2 specific spots. One in the front and one in the back, and the arrow felt like it was on fire. Story 37. Double root canal without anesthesia on abscessed teeth. I could feel everything from them drilling, pulling, and cutting the nerve. Twice. Story 38. Getting Novocaine injected into my hand did not numb my finger adequately, so I felt every prick from the stitching needle. I cut my right pointer finger while trying to get tomato paste out of a small can and needed stitches. Story 39. Mentally, I experienced the pain of falling out of love and breaking his heart by ending the relationship. Physically, I got glass in my foot, which hit a nerve and required multiple stitches. Story 40. The anxiety of believing I am going to hell and there is nothing I can do about it continues to trouble me. I still have some doubts, which I think relate to a desire for certainty. I struggle to have faith in things. I do not know if God is real or if Jesus is truly divine. The issue is that if I do not believe, I am doomed, but I cannot believe and do not want Jesus in my life. I am not going to stop drinking, lusting, or seeking attention. Story 41. I have experienced significant pain due to a progressive neuromuscular disease I inherited. The worst pain I have encountered is intercostal nerve pain. I first felt it when a physical therapy trainee left an ultrasound unit positioned directly on my spine. The sensation is akin to being impaled by burning rebar, which is an inadequate description of the pain. Story 42. I crashed head-on in an all-terrain vehicle accident with another vehicle. I ripped my knee open and was walking around in pain, not realizing my kneecap was exposed. When my friend started screaming, I panicked as adrenaline kicked in. Fortunately, the impact dislocated my knee but also relocated it back into place. I have a graphic photo of the injury that is not suitable for work. I made a full recovery but now have a permanent scar that is 3 to 4 inches long. Story 43. After I delivered my daughter, the pressure numbing my broken pelvis and injured abdomen was finally lifted. Weighing 10 pounds, she was twice the size I was meant to carry. The obstetrician-gynecologist took his own life shortly afterward. Story 44. I had a few millimeters of bone spur removed from my shoulder. At least, that was the pain I felt when the nerve block wore off. Story 45. I had a burst appendix. I was sick for 3 days, my skin turned gray, and my lips were white. An ambulance came and I nearly died. I'm good now. Story 46. I burned my fingers while lighting the fireworks. Then I realized that burned pain is worse than any other pain, like bruises, scars, or cuts. Story 47. Childbirth happened so quickly that there was no time for any pain relief. The pain was overwhelming. Story 48. I had a kidney stone removed from a ureter. They sent me home with a kidney stent, a thin, long tube that wrapped inside my kidney multiple times. It had to remain in place for 4 days. I was in horrible pain for those 4 days, and pain medication was not helping at all. The doctor said I would have to wait 2 additional days for him to remove it, or I could remove it myself on day 4, which was a Saturday. That Saturday morning, I was in so much pain that I took pain medication and 800 milligrams of ibuprofen. After waiting 30 minutes, I removed my own stent. 18 years later, my husband is still in disbelief that I walked out of the bathroom asking whether I should throw it away or take it to my follow-up appointment. Story 49. You might think it's childbirth, but it's not. I don't even remember that. I had a muscle spasm in my back, a horrible knot that hides in the shoulder blade or beneath it. I went to the emergency room, screaming and pleading for someone to cut off my left arm. If they didn't, I would chew it off myself. It was a 15 out of 10 on the pain scale for me. Now, I consistently experience a 6 on average for migraines, so I don't know what's real at this point. Story 50. I had a right hemicolectomy. When I awoke from anesthesia, I thought I was going to die from the pain. I gave birth to my 9-pound, 4-ounce son naturally, and this hurt 20 times worse. Story 51. Physically, I dealt with kidney stones, but emotionally, I experienced the death of my wife. Nothing has ever compared to that loss. I suffered a broken back and a broken sternum from the accident that took her life, but that pain was nothing compared to losing her. Story 52. The loss of my only son was devastating. He jumped in front of an SUV to save 3 people. He was hit with such force that he flew across an intersection and bridge. I felt and heard my heart breaking. I will always carry half my heart with me. Story 53. The local anesthesia wore off before the surgery was over. Laying still was a little tricky while they finished and retrieved the tools. Story 54. A gallbladder attack while already experiencing severe diverticulitis, which had eroded a hole from my colon into my bladder. Story 55. Waking up from anesthesia after my hysterectomy, I experienced an exaggerated pain response. I woke up screaming and trying to get off the stretcher. They administered 2 rounds of fentanyl, 1 of tramadol, 1 of morphine, and finally, Dilaudid controlled the pain. I have had 4 natural childbirths with babies over 8 pounds, 3 of which involved significant tearing, and 1 that broke my tailbone and the baby's collarbone. Story 56. Dry socket for 3 days. I was told to man up by my boss. He couldn't handle knee surgery while being sedated. Story 57. My colon is deteriorating internally due to bleeding ulcers in the gastrointestinal tract. I had my entire colon removed and now have an ostomy bag, which works well for me. The pain I experienced in the hospital when they were trying to prevent me from going into septic shock was unimaginable. Story 58. Physically, waking up after rotator cuff surgery. Emotionally, learning that my best childhood friend had been killed in action in Vietnam. Story 59. Losing my mother unexpectedly has been difficult. I have struggled for a while and don't know if I have fully recovered. Each day feels harder. I wish I could talk to her. Story 60. I recently found out that my husband of 30 years was unfaithful with a 29-year-old. I never thought he would do that. I was happy to see him when he got home, but he looked disgusted with me and told me to sleep in another room. I knew something was wrong. My body is now covered in bruises, and he threatened me with a gun. I am in so much pain that I can't function. I wish I had the courage to end it all. Story 61. Gallbladder attacks that caused pancreatitis are worse than childbirth. I have experienced both natural childbirth and cesarean section. The pain from pancreatitis is unbearable, worse than anything I have ever experienced. Story 62. Gallbladder attacks that caused pancreatitis were worse than childbirth. I've had a child naturally and via cesarean section. Pancreatitis made me feel hopeless. It was the worst pain ever. Story 63. I was 20 when my family dog died at the age of 17. 17 years of having her with me each and every day. Now, knowing that I can't just hold her anymore still makes me cry. even after 2 years. I've lost people before, but this was someone I saw every day. Someone who showed me unconditional love every day. She cared for me when I was sick and when I cried. I keep my emotions to myself, so she knew things no one else knew. She comforted me without anyone even knowing. Losing her was the worst pain I've known, and it still hurts when I think of her. Story 64. I was rolled over by the quad while on the buddy seat and got squished by another person and the quad on top of me. I was stuck. It was also upsetting that my boyfriend didn't visit me while I really couldn't move and was recovering. I'm not sure what hurt the most. Story 65. Concussion and skull fracture. I was a cheerleader and a stunt went wrong. The girl fell, and I took all 120 pounds of her weight to my temple via her elbow. I can't even explain the pain. It felt like I was unconscious while experiencing a migraine at the same time. I continued to have pain for years, and I have since developed epilepsy. My neurologist claims it is unrelated, but it seems highly coincidental. Story 66. I broke my leg in 3 places. I lost my best friend at the age of 14, 3 months prior to the injury. Story 67. I don't know if it's the worst, but the most persistently excruciating pain I've experienced is heartache from being separated from someone I loved. Story 68. Cuddling my beloved companion Shadow, a Siberian husky, while saying my goodbyes to him as he was being put to sleep at home 2 years ago, was the biggest heartbreak I have ever felt. We had a strong bond. He was my baby and my world. He was the best dog I ever had and lived to be 10 years old, just a few weeks shy of turning 11. Story 69. Cramps start in my left leg, and that's when I know it's going to be bad. I feel cramping in my left thigh and left lower pelvic region. Comes on quickly and I take medication, but sometimes it's too late because once it starts, I have about 30 minutes to an hour before it worsens, or it kicks in after the medication wears off. It begins small and then makes me feel like I'm going to lose control, so I rush to the bathroom and relieve myself, which offers temporary relief. The pain intensifies, and I become very pale and nauseous. I experience cold sweats, and the cramps in my left leg and pelvic region worsen in waves. I lie in bed with a heated blanket, on my back with my feet up, pulling my pants away from my pelvis to minimize pressure. I have to wait for the medication to kick in or find out it won't work. I count endlessly, sometimes to 300 or more, because counting while closing my eyes and keeping everyone away from me in a dark, warm room is the only thing that keeps me grounded. If I move around too much or stretch, I will vomit and the pain increases. I have to meditate and remain still. Sometimes it lasts 2 to 3 hours, usually 1.5 hours. It has gotten worse over the years. It affects my work life and ruins my day. I don't have endometriosis. Laparoscopy found nothing. Pap smear is normal. Everything is normal. I only have a mild disc bulge on my lowest disc pressing to the left, possibly on nerves. Maybe that's the cause? I don't know what it is. It gives me incredible anxiety. I've been to the hospital before at its worst. I hate it. I feel trapped in my body. It saddens me that every 4 weeks this is a possibility until I'm in my 50s. It started when I was 16. Story 70. Blown out rotator cuff in my right shoulder and a compression fracture of one of my lumbar vertebrae. Story 71. I was stung over 70 times by yellow jackets. It was not fun. The one incident I can remember clearly was when I was young. I broke my collarbone, but instead of taking me to the hospital, my mother believed she knew best and didn't think it was serious. She kept me home for 2 full days until my father returned early from a work trip and insisted she take me to the hospital. I remember the snap, the pain, and the screaming. Then there are just foggy memories of sitting on the couch, unable to lay down. Afterward, I went to the doctor's office. I didn't realize until I was older that I had gone into shock from the injury. The collarbone never healed correctly due to the delay, and now I have a large knobby growth of bone where it broke. Story 72. Parachuting, one testicle was caught under the harness, leaving my entire weight on that testicle for the entire descent. Story 73. I believe any form of true heartbreak is unique. With almost anything else, there is a way to numb the pain, but with heartbreak, you have to endure it until it is resolved, and for some, it lasts for years. While you can attempt to numb the emotions through drinking, smoking, or using other substances, this approach ultimately harms you. In the end, you will still feel that pain until you confront it. Story 74. Physical pain, gallstones, mental pain. My history before I went into foster care and losing my 25-year-old brother to a cocaine and fentanyl overdose in December 2017. Both experiences caused my stomach to become upset and I lost weight that I didn't need to lose because I couldn't eat. Story 75. I experienced broken ribs during late pregnancy, along with bronchitis. I do not recommend this. I couldn't breathe properly without experiencing severe pain. Story 76. Heartbreak. Discovering that my wife was unfaithful led to the end of our relationship. However, from that pain emerged the most important relationship of my life. I was able to acknowledge that I have struggled with depression for a long time. I learned to express my needs and became a better father. I feel so much better now. Story 77. I remember an incident from my childhood. A friend and I both wanted to use the same hand trowel to dig in the sand. You know, the ones with the pointed metal blade. He took it and ran up the slide at the park. I begged him to send it down the slide to me. Instead, he threw it at me, hitting me square in the mouth, blade first, which supposedly split my mouth vertically down the middle. Fortunately, I don't recall the pain, only the memory of trying to walk home alone with a bloodied face. Luckily, a lady, screaming words I couldn't understand, brought me into her house to call my family. Story 78. I woke up just a few seconds after getting stitches and didn't know what to do. So I stayed silent as best as I could. The stitches were on my feet as well, and through the pain, I sometimes forgot that and tried to use them. Because of this, I ended up reopening the stitches and had to go through the process of having a large open wound and getting stitches twice, which meant recovering from the experience 2 times. On the bright side, I don't recall waking up the second time I received the stitches. Story 79. I had gallbladder removal back in September. 3 days later, I was in the emergency room with severe abdominal pain. They could never really figure out why it was happening. I have never experienced anything like it before. I was in so much pain and was upset with the healthcare workers. I hated being like that too because I am a healthcare worker myself, so I understand how it is to deal with patients in distress. I have a high pain tolerance, and this was the worst pain I have ever experienced. I do not wish that on anyone else. Story 80. A spinal tap. I was 14 at the time, young and stubborn. I told them I didn't want to be put under because I wanted to know what was happening as it occurred. They offered me strong pain medication, but I refused that as well. They managed to convince me to take paracetamol and ibuprofen. It was performed by a resident doctor who had shaking hands and visible anxiety. The needle hit my vertebrae 4 times before I relented, and they put me to sleep. Nothing in my life has ever compared to that. Story 81. My mother constantly chooses my younger sister over me. It hurts that she is always on her side, and it is painful that she openly despises me simply because I take after my father and resemble him in looks and mannerisms. Story 82. I had an appointment for a back waxing, but I had been sunburned a few days earlier. I thought I had healed enough to avoid any serious pain, but I was mistaken. Story 83. I threw my back out so badly that I thought I slipped a disc. I could barely move for 4 days and was in immense pain trying to get out of bed. Story 84. This is a 2-part answer. The worst physical experience was when I had appendicitis. I started feeling unwell, worked the next day, and the day after that, I went to the emergency room where I was told I needed to have my appendix removed. The worst emotional experience, and the most significant pain of all, was losing my mom due to dementia and atrial fibrillation. Story 85. Eating a giant meatball sub and then going to a party afterwards caused unbelievable agony to my self-esteem and rectal muscles. Story 86. Kidney stones and recovery from amputation are significant medical experiences. I had an abscess drained in my armpit yesterday. The doctor cut into my armpit without anesthetic and squeezed out the infection. It hurt, but it does not compare to the pain of kidney stones or recovery from amputation. Story 87. I lost my sister. She died in her sleep at 50. She had been in a toxic job after the company she worked for was acquired by a private equity firm that proceeded to asset strip it. She couldn't leave due to pre-existing health issues. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore and quit. She planned to take 6 months off, recover her health, study, and start working for a great company that had promised her a job in her field. 3 days later, she was gone. 10 years ago, and it still hurts. Story 88. My first year of college was incredibly challenging. I felt as though I was being driven to insanity by the sense of being stuck. Everything seemed like a dead end, and some days my head felt like it was about to explode. I still deal with these feelings today, but I am managing a little better. Story 89. I stood up at a strange angle in my freshman year of high school and let out a strange moan, like a hound dog. I walked to the next class hunched over. When I moved initially, it felt like every nerve in my back was tense and my bones had snapped from the pressure. It was very painful. Story 90. Losing my mom was devastating, especially since I tried and failed at CPR while trying to keep my autistic son safe at the same time. Story 91. This is somewhat silly, but I experienced a caffeine overdose a few months ago, and it was genuinely hellish. I also suffer from severe migraines, and I ended up having one during that time as well while I was coming down. Story 92. I witnessed my dad's body being loaded into a van. I lost both of my parents on the same day. They drowned in a cistern on our family farm. Story 93. Being disowned by my immediate family due to mental health issues has made me feel as though they treat me like I am dead. Story 94. Bone marrow biopsy for cancer treatment. They extract a small piece of bone from your hip, insert a needle, and draw bone marrow. It feels like severe toothache in your entire pelvis and femur. The process lasts about 10 minutes. I had to focus hard not to lose control. Story 95. The current gout attack is keeping me up at 3 a.m. Either that or someone lost a tiny metal shard that randomly ended up between my toe joints. I'm putting my money on gout and hoping I'll be able to walk in the morning. Story 96. I didn't know what blue balls was until I experienced it. I thought it was just something that boys made up to convince girls to engage in intimacy. When my first girlfriend and I were talking, I felt really aroused. But for some reason, I didn't want to relieve myself. Later, I experienced a lot of discomfort. Emotionally, I was affected when my only 2 relationships ended and when our cat of 10 years was put down. Story 97. I am a man, but I have experienced pregnancy. It was what they called a sympathetic pregnancy, and 33 years later, I still remember the pain. It was challenging enough dealing with backache, morning sickness, and even the strange food cravings. I was eating garlic by the bulb. During the birth itself, my partner was fine. She had a nice, comfortable bed to lie on and an epidural, so she didn't feel a thing. I, on the other hand, was sitting in a rather uncomfortable hospital chair with my legs spread over the arms, increasing the pain. The midwife kept shouting, "Push," and I was pushing. I nearly relieved myself 3 times. Unfortunately for everyone involved, the 4th time was the charm. I touched cloth just before my daughter was born. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.